this video, we're going to look at the circumference of a circle. So first we need to look at the parts of a circle. The circumference is the outside edge of the circle. It's the distance all the way around the circle. It's also the perimeter of the circle, but instead of calling it perimeter with circles, it has a special name called the circumference. If we cross from one side of the circumference to the other through the center of the circle, this is called the diameter of a circle. And if we go from the center to anywhere on the circumference, we call this a radius. If we decide to go from one side of the circumference to the other side at any other point that does not go through the center of the circle, this is called a chord. And if we have a line that only touches the circumference at one point, that's called a tangent. Now, if we've got a chord, the area that is the largest side of that chord is called a major segment, and the other part, the smaller area, is called a minor segment. And if we were to put any angle with two radii going to the circumference, we would get a minor sector for the smaller area, and we would have a major sector for the larger area. And if we draw around, we have a major arc and we have a minor arc. And the angle at the center will help us determine what those sizes are. So how many times do you think the diameter will fit around the circumference? So we've got our diameter going from one side of our circumference to the other through the center of the circle. If we take that up and we curve it round once, twice, 3 times, and you can see that there's a little bit left over. So we can say that the circumference is 3 and a bit times the diameter, and that's an approximate value. So instead of saying 3 and a bit, we have a special term called pi, and pi is a numerical value that has no end. So it goes on forever and ever and ever. If we want to know what the relationship is with the radius, so what is the circumference in terms of the radius, there are 2 radii in one diameter. So we can rewrite it as c equals 2 pi r. Now, pi is 3.14159265358 and so on, and as you can see, it goes on and on and on. Thankfully, we don't have to remember pi to that many decimal places. We're only required to learn it to 2. So pi equals 3.14, or on scientific calculators, we can use the pi button. So we're going to look at finding the circumference. And we can use either of these new formula, c equals pi d, so that's the relationship between the circumference and the diameter. So whenever you take the circumference and divide it by the diameter, no matter what size the circle, you will always get the value of pi. Or if we've been given a radius, we can use c equals 2 pi r. So let's have a look at an example. We want to calculate the circumference of this circle, and then we want to round our answer to 1 decimal place. So if we look at the circle, we have a diameter given, and it's 16 centimeters long. So we're going to use c equals pi d because we've got the diameter. That's pi times 16, and if we're using a scientific calculator, we would get 50.265, and then we do some dots to show that our calculator is still giving us more information. Rounding it to 1 decimal place will be 50.3 centimeters because the 6 in the second decimal place is telling us that we need to round up the 2 in our first decimal place to a 3. Now, if we don't have a scientific calculator, then we can use the value of pi. So we can substitute in 3.14. So we're still using the same formula. This time we're going to write 3.14 times 16. That gives us 50.24, and if we round that answer to 1 decimal place, This time, the 4 in the second decimal place is telling us to leave the 2 alone, so our answer will be 50.2 centimeters. Now, this example, we want to calculate the circumference of the circle and round our answer to 1 decimal place, but this time we've been given a radius because we can tell that it's going from the center to the circumference and not all the way across like a diameter. So we're going to use the formula c equals 2 pi r. So we're substituting in our values, so it's 2 times pi times 6 on our scientific calculator, and that gives us a value of 37.699, and then we do the dots again to show that our answer continues on. We round it, the 9 tells us to round that 6 up to a 7, so our answer will be 37.7 meters. Now, if you don't have a scientific calculator, again, we're just going to substitute in pi equals 3.14, as well as our r equals 6. So we're going to get 2 times 3.14 times 6. That gives us a value of 37.68, and if we're rounding it to 1 decimal place, then we're going to end up with an answer of 37.7 meters because the 8 after the 6 is telling us that we need to round that 6 up to a 7 because 37.7 is closer than 37.6 to our value. Now, what happens if we want to work backwards? So if we want to find the diameter given the circumference. So our formula is c equals pi d, or c equals 2 pi r. So we've got a bike wheel here in this example, and it has a circumference of 40 centimeters, and we want to work out what its diameter is. We're going to round our answer to the nearest centimeter. So if we mark on the diameter, which is going from one side of the circumference to the other side of the circumference through the center of our circle, and we know that c equals pi d. So we're still going to substitute our values in. We've got 40 now equals pi times d. Now, the inverse of multiply by pi is divide by pi. So what we have to do is we have to do 40 divided by pi, and that will give us our value for d. So we're going to get 12.73, and we put the dots on to show that our calculator is giving us more information, and we're going to round that to the nearest centimeter. So the 7 in the 10th place is telling us that our units have to go up from a 2 to a 3, so our answer is 13 centimeters. And again, if you're using a non-scientific calculator, you are just using 3.14 instead. So we're going to do 40 divided by 3.14. That gives us a value of 12.73. And when we round it to the nearest centimeter, we're still going to get 13 centimeters. What about if we wanted to work out the radius? Well, we know that the radius is half of the diameter. So we can take our diameter and divide it by 2. And 13 divided by 2 gives us a radius of 6.5 or 6.5 centimeters.